Welcome to today's masterclass. The topic for today is Hawley's retainer. Now, Hawley's retainer was introduced by Charles Hawley in the year 1920. This retainer consists of a labial bow which extends from canine to canine with a retentive clasp, that is basically Adam's clasp, on the first permanent molars, and it consists of an acrylic plate. So this is our Hawley's retainer. If you see, it consists of a labial bow which extends from your canine to canine of one side. It consists of Adam's clasp on your permanent first molar and an acrylic plate. Now this labial bow, it touches the most prominent part of all your anterior teeth, and it consists of two U-shaped loops. Now the distal end of this loop comes between your canine and your premolar. It comes on the occlusal surface and then moves into your acrylic plate. So our Hawley's retainer appliance is basically capable of preventing the anterior teeth from rotating or developing gaps. It also prevents extraction spaces from opening up and is capable of closing minor spaces in your anterior segment. Now, when we consider any kind of appliances, we can divide it into either an active appliance or we have a passive appliance. So passive appliance are basically the appliance which do not apply any kind of force. So it does not produce any tooth movement. The main action is to hold the teeth in the position where it already is. That is, it basically just acts like a retainer. It just holds the teeth in the position. Active appliance, on the other hand, when you consider, these are the appliances which apply active force, okay, and they produce tooth movement. And these are basically appliances which apply force on your teeth and bring about tooth movement. So when you consider our Hawley's appliance, see, this prevents the teeth from rotating and developing gaps, and it prevents extraction spaces from opening up. So these both are properties of a passive appliance. That is, it is just holding the teeth in the position where they are. It prevents any kind of further malocclusion. It is not trying to produce any force. But this particular point, that is, it is capable of closing minor spaces. That means it is closing the spaces. That is, it is applying active force. So this is a property of an active appliance. So our Hawley's appliance can be used as a passive appliance, that is as a retainer, or it also can be used sometimes occasionally as an active appliance. So what are the modifications of a Hawley's appliances? So ideally our Hawley's appliance is made of short labial bow. That is, the distal end of your U-loop will come between your canines and your premolar. But sometimes it can also be made with a long labial bow. That is, the distal end of your U-loop will come between your first and your second premolar. Now, when is this used? It's ideally used when there is gap distal to your canine. So if there is gap distal to the canine and we want to close that space, in that case, we can give a Hawley's appliance with a long labial bow. That is, the distal surface of your U-loop will come between your premolars and will not come between your canine and your premolar, because we want to close this particular space. The next is Hawley's retainer with contoured labial bow. So usually if you see in this first tooth, see, the labial bow is straight, okay. It only touches the teeth, the most prominent part of your labial surface of the tooth. Okay, for example, if this teeth is a bit inwards, it's not touching this particular lateral incisors. So that means it touches only the most prominent surface on the labial surface of your anteriors. Contoured labial bow is like this, see. It is contoured. It touches all the surface of all the teeth, all the anterior teeth. So what is the advantage? It produces, or it provides, a better control over the anterior teeth. The next modification is Hawley's retainer with labial bow crossing distal to the lateral incisor. So ideally our labial bow should cross here, should be here, okay. But in this modification, our labial bow will cross distal to your lateral incisor. Now why is this? So if in our normal short labial bow, that is when your U-loop distal surface crosses your canine and it is between your canine and premolars, it moves occlusally and then goes palatally, it goes into your acrylic plate. So what will happen is this has some kind of interference with your occlusion. Your lower premolar will hit on this particular wire and it will not allow proper seating of your occlusion. So in order to prevent that, what happens is it moves distal to your lateral. So here the canines will not hit because you have your overjet. So because of this, it is more comfortable for the patient. So this prevents interfering with occlusion. The next is Hawley's retainer with continuous labial bow soldered to your clasp. So we know our labial bow, this is your canine. It should ideally pass through between your canine and your premolar and move into your palatal surface. But in this modification, what will happen is the distal, the loop, after the U loop is formed, it doesn't cross the occlusal surface, but it gets extended till your Adam's clasp, and here it gets soldered. Okay, this allows space closure in the anterior as well as in the extraction or the premolar region. So usually a short labial bow is, if you have any spaces in your anterior teeth, it can close. But what if you have spaces between your premolars? Okay, your labial bow gets closed, gets complete, or gets over within your canine itself. So what if the patient has gaps in your premolars? So in that case, if you extend the wire backwards and you solder it, and now if you close the U loop, even if there are some kind of gaps here, it will get closed. So this allows space closure in the anterior as well as in the posterior or the premolar region, and this is more tolerated by the patient because it does not interfere with the occlusion. Since it does not cross your occlusal surface, it's easy, it's better for the patient, and it's more comfortable for the patient when they close their mouth. And it also prevents space opening. See, one of the major drawback of our Hawley's appliances is, in case if it's a patient who for whom they had a premolar extraction. Okay, so you have your second premolar is here, and this is your canine, and your Hawley's comes and moves occlusally. Okay, so this is your second premolar. First premolar has been extracted and we have closed the space. Now since your wire is extending occlusally and it's between your canine and second premolar, and your lower premolar during occlusion tends to hit on this wire, what happens? This applies a apical force, and the space, the extraction space, again tends to open up. So this is a very common disadvantage which occurs with our Hawley's appliances. So such appliance wherein such a design wherein your wire component does not cross your occlusion, what is a major advantage is it prevents your spaces from opening up again. The next modification is Hawley's retainer with light elastics replacing the labial bow. So instead of labial bow, you have something called elastics, or nothing but rubber bands. So these are not rarely used because the use of elastic in the anterior region puts unnecessary forces on these teeth, and it has a tendency to flatten the arch. Flatten the arch means ideally your teeth should be like this. Okay, so what if you have elastics? Okay, when you have elastics, okay, this is for example elastics, a rubber band, it tries to put force. Okay, ideally what is action of rubber band? If you stretch, it tries to come back to its original place. So what happens is this tries to flatten the arch like this. Okay, anteriors tend to flatten, and that is the reason why it is very rarely used currently. The next is Begg's retainer. So in this is a retainer, the labial bow extends distally posterior to the last erupted molar and is embedded in our acrylic plate. So this is your labial bow, and this here you have your U-shaped U loops. Okay, so it extends like this, it moves distally, it moves distal to the last erupted tooth and then ends in your acrylic plate. Here you see there are no Adam's clasp. So the retention is basically provided by these acrylic plate itself. That is, these this particular projections in your acrylic plate itself produces a good retention. So this is your Begg's retainer. The advantage is it can close spaces anywhere, even the anterior as well as posterior, and it doesn't have any kind of occlusal wires, so it is comfortable for the patient. Okay, so this is Begg's wraparound. This is something which we most commonly use right now. Okay, so as we have seen, our Hawley's retainer or Hawley's appliance can be an active appliance as well as can be a passive appliance. It has a short, ideally it has a short labial bow, it has an Adam's clasp, and it has acrylic plate. So this short labial bow, the main disadvantage is it tends to open up extraction spaces, okay, and it tends to interfere with our occlusion. So in order to overcome these, we have various modifications. Currently the most commonly used is our Beg's wraparound. Okay, with this we come to the end of today's lecture. Hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you.